Welcome to another episode of the Hook Turn podcast. On this episode, we've got the Ioniq 6N, Hyundai's anticipated follow-up to its last N electric vehicle, the all-new CLA EV and shooting brake. The early reviews have come in, so let's see what people think of it. And finally, the Hertz AI scandal. Renters getting pinged for small amounts of damage picked up by Hertz's new AI system. How you guys doing, Vivek and Sambib, on this Sunday night?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I had a good weekend. I actually went for a run earlier today, so I ran 16 kilometers, which I was
Oh,
to 10
wow.
miles,
Uh,
which was good. And then
for,
I
for for everyone that doesn't know, which would be almost everyone listening, Vivek's a certified marathon runner, so this is
yeah.
just nothing for him. 16
Yeah.
child's play.
Just getting back into the thick of things. So very satisfying run. And then I made myself some pasta for dinner, so that was nice. And yeah, that's been my Sunday. Caught up with a friend before that, so that was good.
Very good. And Sambib's still enjoying his school holiday break.
Yep, I've just been relaxing at home and waiting for work to start again,
Are you
basically.
are you playing Donkey Kong Bonanza, Sandvik?
Yep, that's correct. I am.
How's that going?
Uh, it's excellent. I will continue playing straight after recording this.
Yeah.
Nice.
And how are you, Adosh?
Great. Just came back from Adelaide and going to Sydney after, so I'm just perpetually on planes at the moment, which is fun. So yeah, that's my life. All right, cool. Let's talk about the Ioniq 6N. So the high performance version of Ioniq 6, the Ioniq 6 EV, tuned by Hyundai's N division. Shares a few components with the Ioniq 5N, but of course, rather than the SUV body, it features the sleeker, more aerodynamic sedan body, so lower center of gravity, which should probably help handling as well. Still some insane power outputs, so nearly 500 kilowatts of power and 0 to 100 of under 3.5 seconds, which I think would have been unheard of for any kind of mainstream manufacturer, let alone Hyundai, in past few years. So still mind-blowing. It's still got the great kind of technology that was introduced on the Ioniq 5N. So you've got the NE shift functionality that simulates gear shifts like a combustion engine car, as well as the N active sound that mimics some of Hyundai's combustion engine N cars. So it's a great kind of introduction into the real sports sedan category for Hyundai. It's pretty much supercar performance here. Starlink certainly seems to match the performance. So yeah, another exciting reveal and another great kind of next step for Hyundai's much vaunted N division. So yeah, what are your first impressions of the new car, guys?
Sandvik?
So it's interesting now where Hyundai is taking their N cars because originally with the i30N when it launched about 6 years ago now, or probably a bit more than 6 years ago, 7 years ago, the whole idea of the N brand was that it would provide um, hot hatch performance in terms of the i30N, but undercutting, say, the traditional rivals in something like a VW Golf GTI, etc. And it's done that reasonably successfully. You see a lot of i30Ns on the road precisely for that reason. On top of the fact that the idea was that, Golf GTI is fast, but it's a bit sensible, whereas the idea of the i30N and still is, it's a bit more fun, bit more aggressive, and yeah, and as mentioned, a much cheaper price than the Golf GTI, and that's where it's brought its success. But it's pretty clear from the Ioniq 5N and now this Ioniq 6 and the strategy is very different. The Ioniq 5N is now very much a premium car, over 110,000, and apparently the Ioniq 6N will be even more expensive. So the question then goes to, the people who are buying the i30N were people who obviously still have a reasonable amount of money because no one's dropping 50K on a car brand new if they are not already have that capacity to do so. But dropping 50K on a car and dropping near 120 on a car, which if it's more expensive than the Ioniq 5N, this car will be, is very, very different. At 120K, you're practically going up with much more premium rivals. And while yes, their Ioniq 5N is pretty much all reviews have said it's one of the best EV performance cars out there. it's still a Hyundai ultimately, and anyone spending that much money on a car will want a more premium brand, and it's reflected in the sales figures here in Australia. The Ioniq 5N has only sold about 350 cars in the past year and a bit, which is well expected given the price, but obviously compared to the mainstream success, relative mainstream success of the i30 and the Kona N and the i20N, it's very, very little. So I guess the Ioniq 6N has another problem. It's not even an SUV. At least the Ioniq 5N isn't, well, it's a big hatchback basically, but it's a bit more of a practical shape. So the audience for this would be even more niche. It would be like if it's 120,000, I cannot maybe someone who's like retired who's looking for a thin car, but we've already spoken about this, but the appeal of an EV sports car is very limited. So even for premium brands, it would be difficult. And a Hyundai even more so. So it'll be interesting to see. But other than that, car looks amazing. Obviously the Ioniq 6N is based on the refreshed Ioniq 6. The original Ioniq 6 pre-facelift had a bit of a divisive reception, but now with the restyling, it looks really, really good,
It looks
basically.
mean. Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah, it looks
I'm
amazing.
glad they've waited until the facelift to bring on the end model. Yeah, to your
Yeah.
point, I don't think this is going to be a volume seller by any stretch, but I think it more or less is Hyundai's halo car at the moment under the Hyundai brand. Of course, they've got Genesis, but maybe part of the role of this car is to just bring people into the showrooms, have this, front and center, really showing off what Hyundai is capable of, not only in the EV space, but also with their performance division and showing the market that, this is what we can do and this is what the Hyundai brand is now going to be moving forward in terms of representing the best that, that anyone can offer in terms of electric development, in terms of performance, in terms of styling, and perhaps that halo effect will then shine over the rest of the cars as well. Vivek, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Hyundai's approach with its um N badged electric cars is quite refreshing because they've taken that same fundamental philosophy that they have with the like i30N, as Sandbib was saying, focus on fun to drive, and they've used these features like N green shift or N e shift, whatever the actual name is, and then the active sound control and those sorts of features that don't really need to be in a performance EV, because performance EV, you have fundamentally, it's you don't really have gears at most. Like in a Taycan, it's like a two-speed transmission at most. So trying to simulate a dual clutch gearbox and having those fake noises is not necessary at all. And a lot of other manufacturers have come out and saying, like, Hyundai's like sort of faking things, and it's not like pure, or it's not like representative, or it's not faithful to the EV driving experience. But I mean, to Hyundai's credit, like, their approach seems to be, screw that. Let's just like focus on what will deliver the most fun experience for drivers. And in their view, this is something that's just fun. Like, it's just something that delivers a more immersive experience. It allows the driver to engage with the vehicle in a more sort of intimate manner. It allows greater control of the vehicle and so on. And all the reviewers from the press, when they adopted the same approach with the Ioniq 5N, really enjoyed it. Like, they thought, the end green shift feature was, quite fun. Um, and I'm sure it'll be the same with this Ioniq 6N, which is probably going to be a refinement, and take that Ioniq 5N approach and just elevate it slightly. So yeah, I mean, it'll have a lower center of gravity than the Ioniq 5N, so it'll probably handle a little bit better. And I think it still has that drift mode as well, so that'll be very cool.
I
So
believe
yeah, I'm
they've
looking.
they've enhanced the drift mode as well. It's now almost like a one pedal type system,
Yeah.
which is insane. I think what this is doing is increasing the accessibility of performance,
Mm,
significantly by offering
mm,
something that, well, by all kind of reports, makes it easy for even the most kind of basic of drivers, if they are to take their car to the track, to just engage in drifting or get the
mm,
car going sideways. So I think, yeah, as you said, like their focus is on being fun to drive, and yeah, maybe some of these things can be perceived as gimmicks,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, driving enjoyment is what they're aspiring towards, and that's what people are saying that this car has gives them, or at least the Ioniq 5 N does, and I suspect this will be no different.
Mm. It will be interesting to see a comparison and how this is positioned against the Tesla Model 3 performance, because that has similar sort of specifications just in terms of the acceleration. Uh, and that's sort of around maybe just was I think that's probably just under the 100K mark. So if this is positioned at, as Sandra was saying, as maybe the 115, 120K mark, then maybe straight line performance will be fairly similar, or maybe the Tesla might be a bit faster. But this, I mean, and obviously styling is subjective, but this is a little bit more unique, has probably has better driver engagement. So I think that would be an interesting comparison as well.
I think this is really a car in a category of its own. If you take out the fact that this is a Model 3 performance, this is actually track focused in a lot of ways. So
Mm.
you don't really have many players in this space, but perhaps one player that will sort of play in the same area is going to be the whatever they call it, but it could be the i3M or MI3, whatever
Yeah,
you
then
want to position it as.
BMW's Neue Klasse, upcoming Neue Klasse performance EV. Yeah, definitely. So
Yeah,
yeah, and I think BMW, like, I mean, what they're doing with Neue Klasse, like they've previewed their, was it their quad motor powertrain? So this is and from all accounts, from the initial sort of preview drives, that's like offers a crazy level of performance. But I think that the pricing strategy for that model will be quite different as well. Like that's almost maybe more of a Taycan competitor, or more directly positioned as a Taycan competitor. Whereas I feel like this is like it won't. It's not going to be expensive as even the base Taycan. Like it will be well below that. And it's sort of in between like the Model 3 performance and probably the Taycan. So yeah, so that's interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see how this car does, but it is good that they've based it on the refresh. I think the refresh has improved the styling quite a bit, both at the front and the rear. They've cleaned it up. And that huge, what is it called, a swan neck rear spoiler.
yeah.
That looks really sick, to be
Mm,
honest.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see this powertrain in the a production version of the N74 concept.
Oh yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
retro styled one.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah.
One,
It's
yeah,
still hydrogen powered.
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
Unfortunately,
I
it's
wonder
not
what
like
they're
that.
gonna do with that. Like, surely they're not gonna relate. Like, who adopts and who drives hydrogen vehicles at the moment? Like, there's no infrastructure in Australia. I mean, even in the US and Europe, it's very, very limited. Like, I think they'll. I wouldn't be surprised if that actually becomes the case. Like, they do put this powertrain in that car, or at least have the option of it. So yeah, yeah. Let's see. But a very cool retro design with that one.
Yeah, I actually saw a Ioniq 5N today and spent a little while taking a few photos of it. So these cars definitely stand out in person. But yeah, perhaps the pricing puts it out of reach for a few more people than something like the i30N does, or even the Kona N. Or they've even got the i20N as well. So it definitely sits in a different category to a lot of their cars. But um, it shows what Hyundai can do, and they're continuing to do amazing things. And yeah, I for one kind of respect kind of the direction they're going with these vehicles, and pretty much the whole N range, which no one really expected when they brought about the N brand that they could actually achieve something like this. For someone to just go straight into the performance realm and really achieve a driver's car across the board for all their models is a huge achievement. I think it helps when you hire the likes of BMW kind of alumni
Yeah,
to really hone the driving characteristics of these cars. But fair play. They've come out of the gates, and every car basically from the N subdivision has been a hit so far.
yeah. I think they've taken a very sort of consistent approach with their strategy in terms of like always having new end models on the board. Like it's not just they've come up with one like i30 and then and then just given up. Like they have been like putting in a lot of money on developing these end cars and having like a performance range and trying to build up the reputation of the end brand. So I think that's, yeah, definitely kudos to Hyundai for that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, from one EV to another, but not so much performance to focus this time. So the brand new CLA EVs had its first reviews come through, and then also the new shooting brake version was just revealed this week. So I don't know about you guys, but initially I sort of dismissed this news. I thought, oh, it's a CLA. It kind of looks a bit weird. There's nothing too special about it. But then as the reviews started flowing in, I started to see some of the titles of the videos. Is this a game changer? Is this going to change, the whole kind of electric sedan landscape?
Mm,
Tried to peer into a little bit more, and then I realized, wow, the claimed range is very, very impressive. So
mm,
depending on what you read, it's between 700 to 800 kilometers, which compared to something like the longest range Model 3, which is around the 600K mark, is a huge jump and
mm,
could really thrive in something like Australia, where we don't have as many charges as a lot of countries. Point to point, you might have to kind of really kind of really look for the next charging station, especially if you're traveling from the likes of Sydney to Melbourne. So this could really relieve their range anxiety for a lot of drivers. So yeah, apart from the range, which is a huge deal, it charges pretty quickly as well. It's got an 800-volt architecture, so 10 to 80% in around 15 minutes. It's got Mercedes-Benz's new infotainment system. So they've changed the name a few times. I think it was MBUX before. Now it seems to be MBOS. It's got built-in AI with the likes of ChatGPT, Google Gemini as well built in, which has varying results depending on the reviews you watch. But it's interesting that they're innovating in this space. Um, but yeah, overall, like it's got a lot of kind of firsts for Mercedes. It's really taken the learnings from their Vision, I think it's EQXX concept. It's their first, I think, electric model since the EQ line. So it looks like they've kind of deprecated the EQ line, just focusing on regular brand names as well. So it really sets up the next generation of electric cars for Mercedes. And so far in Germany, apparently they're struggling to keep up with the demand. It's been that popular. So yeah, really, really kind of interesting reveal, I think. That on first glance probably didn't seem that great, but interested to hear what you guys think.
yeah. This is, yeah, as you've been saying, Adash, this is a very interesting car. I think in terms of the actual styling, just from a pure design perspective, it's not as with the especially the sedan. Um, it's not as like classically beautiful as the outgoing model, which is, and I know that's again styling is subjective, but I think the proportions are a bit off, and some of the front design with the way the front is sort of structured and that light bar and so on, it's a bit weird. But I think the real story with this CLA is the substantive engineering that Mercedes has done. So in terms of, and that comes from their experience with the Vision EQXX, and it's all about sort of making all of the components interact very, very efficiently with each other. So having very efficient motors, having very efficient aerodynamics. So I think this car has a drag coefficient of below 0.21, which is extremely impressive. And then even things like the inverters, the overall power consumption of the car, and you can see that all of that very sort of system driven approach, sort of that whole of car approach, has sort of yielded extremely good results in terms of efficiency. Because you look at the battery capacity, which I believe is maybe, I think it's what, 75 kilowatt hour battery or something, not something that is huge like a 90 kilowatt hour battery or a 100 kilowatt hour battery, but even with what is like a moderately large battery, they're still getting ranges of above claimed range on the WLTP cycle of above 750 kilometers. So that's from an efficiency perspective. Like that's, I think that's, they're saying it will be consumed between 12 and 14 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Like that's extremely impressive, and sort of significantly beyond the claimed consumption of most other EVs. Like I think maybe the only other model that gets anywhere um, close in terms of the energy efficiency is probably the Lucid Air, and that's like essentially only in the US. But from like a from the substantive engineering approach, I think this is a very impressive car because they're not having to spend a huge amount of money on putting in like a expensive, big, heavy battery. They can still have that moderately sized battery that's very comparable to this, like the same battery that you can get in like a, BYD Seal or a Tesla Model 3, but it's definitely going like basically 200 kilometers further on a single charge. And practically for Australians, when this car is available, that means maybe you could drive from Sydney to Melbourne comfortably on one charge, or not on one charge, but like with only having to recharge once, which is quite impressive. So yeah, I am looking forward to seeing this car in person. I think Mercedes has done a very impressive job with their new MMA platform. And the other thing I will say is that this car, even though it's available as a pure EV and also as a hybrid, the pure EV version still has a big frunk. So it has like I think they're saying it has like 100 liter or 110 liter frunk, which is quite a large size, and especially for something that is also going to be available as a combustion engine car, because you see like most cars that are available as both a combustion engine powertrain and as an EV powertrain, they'll often compromise on the EV side of things. Like you even like with the BMW i4, for example, like that's basically an adapted version of a combustion engine platform, and the consequence of that is that it doesn't have that practicality in terms of like having a front trunk or a huge boot or anything. Whereas this car somehow, even though it's available as an EV, it still has uh, a big frunk, and then you can get the hybrid version as well. So yeah, I'm really interested to see this car in person. I think I'm not a huge fan of the software obsession with the screens on the interior. Like I think Mercedes has just continued their usual approach of having screens everywhere.
I saw a comment describing it like a high-tech kitchen
Yeah,
interior. So
yeah,
it gives me a weird feeling as well. I don't know if it's because the dash is a bit high set and it's just like
yeah.
a plonked on
It's too
appliance type
vertical.
feeling there. There's
Yeah,
something really off and unsettling about it for me.
yeah,
It doesn't feel designed. It feels like they've just
yeah,
put a log there of just
yeah.
screens and just called it a day, and it feels off. But
Yeah. Like I think this car it doesn't what the one thing that it doesn't do well is the interior quality. From what I've heard, it's not incredible. Like it's not like the old like 90s Mercedes where you had like that over-engineered feel. Like you can see they've put their money in the actual like hardware and the substantive engineering of the EV and power aspects and the electronics, but the perceived interior quality and the interior design, I am not the biggest fan of, because yeah, to Adash's point, like the dashboard just looks like they've put in three screens on like a shelf, like a vertical sort of shelf almost, and then they basically called it a day. And then they've, Mercedes of recent years have gone big on ambient lighting, so they've put in some ambient lighting, and then they've that's like, oh, that's we're done, and that's it. So
they've gone from nightclubs to kitchens.
yeah,
What
yeah,
will they do next for the next vehicle?
yeah,
It'd
interesting
be
to
nice
see.
if they could design a car interior again, but
Yeah,
maybe this
like
is what
something that's
the people want. Who
yeah,
knows? Yeah.
yeah.
Sambib, what do you think of this one?
It's interesting because the A-Class has always been a entry point for the Mercedes lineup. Certainly not the current Gen A class, but the previous Gen A class, the one from the mid 2010s, has always been like was even though, if I'm correct, the base model of that A class wasn't even Renault engine. It was a Renault engine, wasn't even a Merc engine. So but the idea was with the A class that it was a relatively affordable way to get into something with the Mercedes badge on it. Now, the reality is if the A-Class is going and this EV is going to replace, once again, the idea of this entry-level luxury European car is going to go away. I can't imagine this starting anything under 60K, probably really closer to 70 if we're being realistic. Um, so the traditional consumer of the A-Class, which was basically a young professional, say in the mid to late 20s, is probably not going to be able to afford, unless if they think, but it's going to be a very much smaller group that can afford to spend, upwards of 70,000 on a small sedan, but which is effectively what it is, right? It's no longer a purchase where it's like, okay, it's a small hatchback, but I'm only spending 40 something K on it, and I'm getting something with the Mercedes badge. Yes, it's not that fancy, and certainly if you're getting the cheaper models, certainly not even German engineering necessarily all of it, but still you got a Mercedes badge. So the audience for this will be very interesting, because when you're now thinking of the price that this will sit at, who's going to be the audience? Because anyone who can afford to spend the 60 to 70,000 that this car will charge will probably be looking at more practical options, because the reality is that it's going to be the use cases for this are a bit more limited compared to something like an SUV. Yes, it's not going to have a zero market share, but certainly the idea was that with the CLA and certainly the A-Class, that it would be 50 something thousand and you get a car with the Mercedes badge. So I'll be curious to see. Reading the other main thing, the MBOS, it's seemingly not just revised infotainment, but apparently now completely integrated with the car itself. Looking at the what Mercedes is saying, basically with over their updates, they can literally make changes to thermal management, battery changes, etc. So it's not just just the infotainment that's changing. It's now the MBOS is completely being integrated into the way that the car drives, and a significant amount of the engineering of the car as well. So the idea goes similar to Tesla, that over the next few years after purchasing the car will get more features, so to speak, not just infotainment wise, but obviously in terms of even the car's driving features. On top of that, it's also got the main benefit of having the downloadable apps and stuff, which Tesla has already offered. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see who actually the new market for this car will be. And as with everything, cars are getting more expensive. And in Australia, certainly, unlike with Europe and the US, we've got a lot of Chinese brands, a lot of options where if you're going to spend $60,000 on an EV or 60 something thousand, yes, it might not be as fancy, but a regular Tesla Model 3 or even a BYD, I'd be looking at those because at least they're more practical, just as stylish, probably similar tech, etc.
I'm interested to see if they come out with an AMG version of this, because you often see a lot of the kind of A-class and CLAs actually
Yeah,
being the entry-level AMGs, because it's
yeah,
a chance
correct.
to show off that you've got an AMG in your garage and it's the entry point to it. But given they've gone with an electric and hybrid powertrain,
Mm.
will they make the plunge to make another AMG, or will it be electrified? I think that would be really interesting to see. Yeah, I was surprised actually that they didn't come out with another A class. I don't have the sales figures in front of me, but
Mm.
from what I've seen with the current generation, I don't think it's done too poorly. I don't think
Yeah.
they haven't struggled so much, at least in Australia. But perhaps there's just more margin with slightly higher end models, and I think maybe they had this in mind that they wanted to really pack this with technology and have this as the showcase for the next generation of their EV architecture. So they probably felt that, I think for that they want to make this their new mainstream model and the entry point for Mercedes, and try and get this in the hands of as many people as possible. But yeah, I'm a little bit sad to see the A-Class go. I think after the first generation, which was definitely a little bit of an ugly duckling, and even the second generation, which was slightly improved but not great, it really hit its stride in its third and fourth generations, and I think it was really worthy of the Mercedes badge. You would say previously, perhaps, it was a little bit of the cheap Mercedes, but it really grew into its own in the last couple of generations. And I think, yeah, for that entry level option, now, you probably need to go back to the mainstream brands if you're trying to operate in that price range. I think there's a few players like Cupra now that maybe have taken up that space, the semi-premium. Mazda's try to go a little bit semi-premium as well. Hyundai to some extent too with some of the higher end models. So yeah, perhaps it's just now going to be a trend of these luxury brands moving away from that segment of the market, and trying to focus again on high margins and differentiate with technology, which isn't cheap, but is probably the best way to separate themselves from the mainstream, which is getting increasingly difficult with more and more cars offering features for a great value. So yeah, it's a big challenge for luxury car makers to see how they can differentiate and how they can really try and capture most of the market while also retaining margins. So, but potentially this is the first step in Mercedes' new strategy to do that.
Mm. I mean, for Mercedes, it seems to be premium seems to be have more screens. So, so
And lights, screens
yeah,
and
and
lights,
lights.
yeah.
And I guess as a broader comment, it's actually interesting to see how each of the big three German brands is taking a slightly different approach in terms of their next generation sort of like user interfaces. So, like we've seen BMW, for example, with their Neue Klasse models that they've already previewed that they're going to have that panoramic iDrive system. So they'll have just one sort of big infotainment screen, but then ahead of the driver, they have that what is it, the panoramic heads-up display, and they have that that's very sort of subtle instrument cluster that sort of stretches across the width of the dashboard, but it's not like a screen per se. It's more like a almost like a head-up display, and then they have a second like augmented reality sort of display. So it's a lot more like it's a lot more subtle in its approach compared to Audi and BMW. And Audi is sort of with their new sort of PPE, the premium platform electric cars. They've just taken again that you'll have that curved sort of huge wraparound screen that has that big sort of instrument cluster, but then also that big sort of I think it's a 14.5 inch infotainment display that's angled towards the driver, and then you have a third screen that's more passenger focused and a front passenger focused, and that's sort of optional. And then Mercedes has sort of taken that same approach as well, just have three screens, and the third one can be optional. But so yeah, it's interesting to see how they will sort of evolve in the future. I will say personally, I'm a fan of BMW's approach because I think it's a lot more subtle and more sort of hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the road, rather than being like a gizmo overload.
Yeah. I actually didn't mind just the current generation of Mercedes' infotainment
Mm,
system with the C class and the GLC, and I guess to some extent the S class as well. The cars without the hyper screens, where
mm,
you did have that kind of portrait tablet coming up from the center console and just at your fingertips, similar to maybe like a Porsche Taycan. I thought that was a good approach, but now with this shelf approach again, I don't know, it's not for me. But yeah, you're right. These automakers are all going in different directions, and I think at least they're not doing what, every other kind of car maker seems to be doing, which is just plonking on a tablet to some extent. They're all trying different ways of integrating it and trying to see how they can maximize the user experience in their own way. I think with this car as well, with the introduction of integrated ChatGPT and Gemini, the voice control seems
yeah.
to be a bit of an improvement as well.
Mm,
Results are mixed. I saw a review from Matt Watson at CarWow where he tried to get the car to take him to a restaurant that was at least rated 4 stars that served duck, which is more complex than just saying, I want to go to this place. It did take him to some options. Not all of them had duck. One of them did eventually have duck. But so it shows that it can still be confidently incorrect, which is the
mm,
nature of generative AI, but at least it now sort of understands you a little bit better, which has been a huge frustration with voice control systems. I was sitting in a BYD today, actually, just a demonstration model in a mall, and the voice control system was actually quite good. Everything I kind of asked it to do, it did do very quickly, which you can't say for a lot of other kind of mainstream brands, especially the previous generation of Mercedes cars. So again, with the infotainment system, the over-the-air updates, it's all sort of moving in the right direction, I think, among all these brands. But as to which approach kind of wins or serves best, we'll have to see in the next generation to see how things play out.
mm,
Cool. From AI in cars to AI being used to make sure you haven't dented your car. We've got Hertz in a bit of hot water recently. So they've been trialing these AI-powered vehicle inspection systems. They basically use cameras and computer vision to scan vehicles for dents, scratches, and other interior damage. But what we've seen is that customers have actually been pinged for damages that considerably minor. They haven't even actually happened with their own kind of usage of the car. So it's sort of oversensitive and charging customers. And another issue is that these customers, they aren't even able to really dispute the charges too easily. So they're sort of just pinged with a fee, and Hertz made it very difficult for people to actually t talk to a real person. So it's a wider issue than just cars and just sort of rental agreements with customers around the use of AI and perhaps if it's faulty or overly sensitive. But I think the common thread with all the kind of issues that have been coming up is that you probably still need a little bit of human intervention. But it is disturbing to see if this technology does roll out not only for Hertz but other manufacturers, how it's going to impact customers. So I'm interested. Are you in favor of these changes, Sambib, or do you feel like this is just a slippery slope for some worse things to come?
The reality is that most of these things are only being basically trialed by these car companies, obviously. It's not necessarily because they think AI can do a better job than humans, because they obviously can't, but obviously it's one less friction point in terms of returning the car. And on top of that, eventually down the line, they'll get to save on that human labor cost as well. I've actually been reading that one of the main reasons is that they've also introduced this is that it basically now because um, rental car companies actually make a lot of their money not off the hiring of the car, but the extras you can get, particularly the extra insurance. Because the vast majority of people don't obviously crash their car, but most people do get that extra insurance so that they have $0 excess. I rented a car only last week and I paid that extra $300 to get my excess down to zero if I, in a hypothetical situation, did crash the car. So that's just easy money for those companies. So from what I understand, with Hertz, if you get the full insurance, then you don't actually have to be worried about the AI scanner unless if you fully crash the car, you're fine. But obviously, it's a way for them to get some extra money out of those who might not have got the extra insurance, but they probably still took care of the car extremely well, but well, obviously it's got false flags as well. But even if they had a tiny scratch or something, it'd be a way for them to get a bit of extra money out of it. Obviously, it's going to be a while before it gets introduced here. It's not even rolled out in the US quite widely. It's only in a few select major airports, and there'll still be many, many years before they actually can roll it out everywhere. Because while in the long term they save on the money in terms of the hiring of a person, I imagine would be extremely expensive to set it up in the first place, set up this tech in the first place. It would be a huge investment. So it'll take many years before it happens. But it sort of does show that, yes, like again, the idea of using AI to do things like, seeing how a car has changed. Ultimately, your thing like obviously we don't have to worry about it for many years here in Australia, and even in the US, if you travel there, it probably wouldn't have to worry about it. On top of that, this is really only Hertz and Thrifty who are owned by Hertz that are doing this. As far as I'm aware, no other rental car company is actually on board with this. And given that the negative backlash that Hertz is already getting out of this, it's unlikely that any of them will adopt it. But yeah, it's an interesting use of AI, I guess. But fundamentally, it's always going to be in the but to the benefit of the company, not to the benefit of the customer. As much as they say, oh, it means that you can just drop your car off and walk away and not have to talk to someone. The reality is that if you suddenly got hit with a sudden $300 extra thing for a tiny scratch on a wheel, obviously you certainly wouldn't appreciate it.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm interested. Do you pay the full insurance only because you knew you were going to be using the car for extensive distances this time around, or do you always pay the
I
full?
usually always pay the full insurance, correct. Weirdly enough, I've got this theory that if I ever skip on the insurance, I will get into a thing. Whereas if I don't, then
Murphy's Law.
then
I
I'll be
believe in
perfectly
Murphy's
fine.
Law.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. I've never paid the full insurance, so I
Yeah,
was I was interested
same.
in that.
But,
Yeah, I
like,
always pay.
it's interesting. Like, I feel this idea is something that, like one of the, product development or business experts or whoever does that sort of work at Hertz came up with, and then they sort of really focused on how much money it would save the company rather than how it would affect the customer experience. So like in Australia, like I think when you hire a car, you have to allow generally for fair wear and tear. Like, and that doesn't mean, you make a massive scratch and that's okay. But like, obviously the cars are going to get used, and the value of the car depreciates, and one of the reasons why it depreciates is that the condition of the car gets worse over time. Like that's just fundamental to how a car is driven and used. So, like I'm not a huge fan of this idea because I think you have to allow for that sort of like a little bit of leeway there, and you have to allow for that sort of personal personal touch. And again, like often you hire this car, like for example, when my Volvo was in for repair, I got a Kia Picanto, and that had a scratch at the front, and I I noticed it, and I talked to the people who were at Europe Car who were organizing the car rental, and they said, oh yeah, we've already taken that into account. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. So my biggest concern would be that if it was an entirely AI driven system, that system would not realize whatever pre-existing damage there was, and then suddenly like you park the car, and I don't know how it works, whether somebody goes around with the phone and then uses has the camera open and then uses AI to scan it, or whether it's like parked in a garage and there's like a camera on the top that is scanning the car for like any damages or whatever. But like it's um yeah, it's you kind of need that personal touch with having good customer service. Like uh, people don't really, as far as I know, don't really love hiring the process of hiring a car, and this sort of just makes it even worse. So I am not the biggest fan of this idea.
It's bringing back common sense to customer service, CS to CS. Like you can't just wholly rely on AI
Exactly.
systems or computers to do a job when there's some sort of human element and
Yeah.
assessment required to
Yeah.
deliver the right experience. So yeah, I'm actually very surprised that they've gone full AI and they didn't actually consider the fact that if it does get things wrong, where's the human intervention? Perhaps they will now with the backlash that's been coming through. But I can fully understand how it makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient to assess cars and gets kind of employees are focused on what they need to be focused on by saving time on this aspect. But at the end of the day, if this is going to affect the relationship with their customers, it's just going to cost them more business anyway, and it'll more
Exactly.
than kind of take away from any kind of cost
Gain.
savings that
Yeah.
they would have gained from implementing such a system as well. So yeah, they probably didn't think it through fully or just had way too much trust in the system. And I'm sure it will get better over time. The AI you use right now will always be, or in most cases, will be the worst AI you'll ever use as it
Mm.
continues to learn and get better. But yeah, hopefully for the sake of consumers, they start to listen to the feedback and they implement a more holistic approach that also involves some human intervention and common sense as needed.
Do we know how this system like practically works? Like, so you finish your car rental, you park the car somewhere, and then what happens? Is there like some sort of automated camera that goes around, and or do you have to park in a special spot, and that spot has like some sort of 360-degree camera system that goes around and scans the car, or is it somebody just has like an app that like a Hertz app that uses AI, and the AI tells it to, okay, take a photo here, take a photo here. Like how does it actually sort of practically work? Like, do we?
Uh, I've got a photo of it in front of me. It's literally you drive through a big scanner
Oh, okay,
that scans it. Yeah, 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 yeah. So
okay.
it scans your car. Yeah.
So that'd be a
That's what.
significant hardware cost as well to implement.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what I was saying. It's one of the reasons why it's very unlikely you're going to see this adopted, even by Hertz on a mass scale, because the amount of money it would take to set it
yeah,
up at every single one of their rental
yeah.
locations
Capital
would
costs
be
will be
astronomical.
huge.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep,
I
correct.
imagine a mobile system could be implemented though. Like you just have one person take a whole scan of the car and it would
But
be.
then how is that more effective, I guess, than just getting them to do it with their eyes, if that makes sense?
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, if you
Uh,
could do it in like one quick sweep rather than spending, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes doing it, maybe it
maybe,
helps.
yeah.
But yeah, as you to your point, it's probably less efficient than just getting the car through a scanner anyway.
yeah. It's interesting because like what like when I dropped my car off after I finished after my rental was complete, like the guy at Europe Car, I think he had like some sort of special app open on his iPad, and that iPad sort of told him, okay, take a photo of this angle, take a photo of this angle, and then I think it guided him to do like a visual inspection with his own eyes as well. So it's sort of like it was like almost like a blended
Hybrid
approach.
approach.
Yeah, yeah, which is like I'm not sure if there was actually AI used in that. Like I don't think there was. It was just like the app telling him to take this photo and take this photo and from this angle. But like, yeah, it's interesting because like this AI, like it seems like it's almost like you're going through not a car wash, but like it's the same approach. There's like some huge overhead camera or some sort of scanner, and then like that would be you would be wanting to spending, probably thousands of dollars on that entire setup, and like you'd really be hoping that it would pay off in the long term, but then how do you know like how well those cameras will last? And like, there's like it's not like the cameras are going to be permanently good as well. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting business decision, to what you guys were saying earlier. So yeah.
Definitely. Okay, that wraps up another episode of the Hook Turn podcast. If you liked what you saw or if you liked what you heard, then please remember to rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get podcasts, and subscribe on YouTube. But we'll see you in the next one.